thus members of NCRSP, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions. So, Candidate Green, if you're on and able to chat with us, we welcome you, and we're so proud that you are running for office. Want to give you a chance to get to meet our members and tell them a little bit more about yourself.
Great. Good morning to everybody. Thanks so much for having me on this morning. It's great to be with you and look forward to the conversation. What I thought I would do is just share briefly about my experience, vision, just be sure that we know what the status of the race is, um, and then we can go from there. So a little bit about myself. Um, I was the superintendent of Guilford County Schools for 7.5 years, from 2008 to 2016. And prior to that, I was the deputy superintendent and the general counsel for Charlotte and Mecklenburg schools, also for a total of 7.5 years. Um, Most recently, I was the executive director for the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, which is a foundation that's based here in North Carolina, only funds in North Carolina, supports many, many different things, including supporting public education. Also have lots of connections to other sort of public school related issues, having served on any number of boards that focus on things like homeless students, the arts, athletics. I served as the president of the North Carolina High School Athletic Association for a term, media, policy, community support. If you go a little further into my background, I am a graduate of Duke University. In fact, I'm a double Dookie, having gone there for both undergrad and I got my law degree there as well. And certainly have had a wonderful sort of and blessed sort of personal life as well. I've been married for 32 years, have two wonderful children, adult children, both of whom attended and graduated from our public schools here in North Carolina. So vision, and lots of folks say, Mo, go ahead and say when you are elected as the next state superintendent of public instruction. The vision that we'll put forward is a vision that we
have COVID. I have COVID.
You maybe can mute her.
A vision that we utilized when I was superintendent of Guilford County Schools. The vision we used there was to start with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, intelligence plus character, that being the goal of true education, and combine it with a focus on excellence. Because of the great work that our educators did in Guilford County Schools, along with the support we received from parents and community, our students were able to reveal how exceptional they were. Our graduation rate went from the 70s to almost 90%. It's now over 90% in Guilford County Schools. Raised academic achievement in any number of measures as well. And the district was recognized as a national district of character. And so that's what we would seek to do on a statewide level. And I tell folks all the time, we ought to be striving to have our school system be the number one in the entire country. Notwithstanding that there are lots of issues, facing our public schools, everything from funding, where we're now 48th in the country with regards to what we are putting into our public school system. If you compare us to the national average of $16,000 per student, Virginia is a little over $14,000. South Carolina is over $15,000 per student. We're a little over $11,000 per student. So you times that times 1.4 plus million students in our public school system, and you recognize that that's real money that's missing from our public schools. That would be, just it's a great need. And at the same time, then policymakers, General Assembly are deciding to put money into things like the taxpayer-funded private school voucher program, which is literally taking hundreds of millions and ultimately will be billions of additional dollars, um, to go to that program that could, in fact, go to supporting our public schools, and I would argue should be going. One thing that I do want to share is the status of my race. The latest polls are public polls that are out there. They're about 3 weeks or so old now, but they basically show that me and my opponent were statistically tied. Um, so, there are substantial numbers of folks who are still, quote, undecided. And if you know much about me and my opponent, and I'm happy to share more, um, it's really hard for anyone to be undecided if they know about the two of us. So what we on my team think that undecided is really they don't know about either of the two of us, or at least one of the two of us. And so we have spent the last few weeks getting our information out, primarily through TV and social media, and hopefully that will begin to make an impact on folks who don't know, and then those who do, hopefully will start to come our way in greater numbers. So that's where things are, and again, I'll be happy to address any questions that y'all may have of me at this time.
Thank you. Yes, and we do want people to know more about you, because if they do know about you or know you, they know that you care about education and public education, especially. So this is a follow-up to what you said about you and your opponent. Share with us what the difference is between you and your opponent.
Great. So I'll share in sort of three categories. One will be experience, second will be belief, and then third will be character. So, with regards to experience, you've heard about mine. My opponent, she homeschools her children, has never put her children into our public schools, has never, done anything like worked in our public schools either. And so, I'm not saying anything against homeschooling if that's what folks choose to do, but this position is the state superintendent of public instruction is the chief administrative officer for public schools for the state of North Carolina. And so it oversees, 2,500 plus schools. As I mentioned earlier, 1.4 million plus students, administers a budget of $11 billion annually, has a staff of about 1,000 employees. This is a massive, massive, complex educational operation, to put it simply. And so, my experience, I think, makes us completely different compared to our levels of experience makes us completely different. And I would suggest to you, in this place, you need someone who has had significant experience to run this kind of operation. Second would be belief in our public schools. So as I mentioned earlier, my wife and I were blessed to have two children. We were also blessed to be in a situation where we could have chosen where to put our children. We chose to put them into our public schools because we knew that they were good and that they would deliver. And in fact, they did. And to the point that 6 years ago, I actually wrote a letter to Charlotte Mecklenburg schools where they started, and Guilford County schools where they finished and graduated. And I wrote it with no idea I'd be running for this position now. I wrote it because I felt it on my heart that I needed to thank our public school educators for the marvelous job they had done in educating our children. And that letter, folks have said, is a love letter to public school educators. Was published by the Charlotte Observer and the Greensboro News and Record. My opponent, again, homeschools her children, but goes further than that with regards to belief in our public schools. I mean, she calls them everything from absolute cesspools of evil, lies, and deception suggest that they're indoctrination centers and that they've been taken over by Satan. And the list is long on the things that she has said about public schools. And then third would be character. And so you heard what we tried to do in Guilford County Schools, where we made character development equally as important as academic outcomes. And that would be something that we would be trying to do at the state level. My opponent has done all. She took her own children to the attempted insurrection. Comes back from that same night, where there's literally been loss of life. Puts her cell phone video and calls for the President Trump, to set aside the U.S. Constitution, invoke the Insurrection Act, arrest folks for treason who helped certify the 2020 election. This is a person who's also called for executions of many, including President Biden, Governor Cooper. It's called for the public execution on pay-per-view of Barack Obama. There is a website that our team created called the ABC of Morrow. So if you go to abcmorrow.com, you can see for yourself the sorts of things that she has said. Every letter, so refers to something, B refers to something, all the way through Z. And I can tell you quite honestly, you get to Z, and there are still things that aren't included in that list. And so I would just encourage folks to say, is this the kind of character we want next to our children? And that's why I say all the time that the very soul of public education is on the ballot. And we need champions of public education to stand up. But those would be the three things I would lift up: experience, belief, and character.
Thank you. So when you are elected, you will be wearing a lot of hats. What will your top priority be?
Yeah, it's always a challenging question to narrow it down from one thing, because when you're running a complex organization, there are lots of things that you've got to have as, quote, top priorities. Mm-hmm. Certainly, I do believe we're at a place where, let me just say this before I tell you what I think I will be, certainly spending an inordinate amount of time. This position, I argue, is not only the chief administrative officer, but the chief advocacy officer for public schools. Yes. And so in the advocacy role, then I do think that one of the things I'll be spending a lot of time on is to try to get us to increase funding in our public schools that will be then directly increase compensation for our educators. I do think that we've reached a point where we're trying to trying to have a incredibly important educational system that is, the foundation of which is really being pulled from underneath us, because we're not paying our educators sufficiently enough. Mm-hmm. And so that is then causing us to lose lots of educators, not be able to recruit potential new educators, and then retain them and advance them as they go through their careers. So compensation for educators, I think, has got to be one of the top priorities that I'll be.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things in your position would be to oversee the curriculum for our state. What ideas do you have for strengthening our curriculum? Then I do see another question in the chat, but we'll answer this and then we'll get their question in the chat.
Okay, so certainly, yes, this position works with the State Board of Education to set things like the standard course of study, which then educators can use to develop a curriculum around that, and certainly receive support from this office. So the things that I would be focused on, so there's some things that I would actually be focused on continuing and expanding. As an example of that, that would be the early literacy efforts that are going on in the state right now that's focused on the science of reading. And just as an aside, I worked with a leadership implementation team here in North Carolina on implementing the science of reading for North Carolina, along with our current state superintendent, Catherine Truitt. We worked with 5 other states on that implementation effort, if you will, learning from each other. So that would be something that we would certainly want to continue. When I say expand, I do believe we've got to think about how to get that expanded into our middle school as well, because there are lots of students in our middle schools that are also struggling readers as well. One of the areas that I will be wanting to explore pretty heavily with others is what we can do in and around mathematics. Understand that some other states are actually starting to see some results in how they are teaching mathematics, and so we'll want to put together a team to learn more about what's happening in those states and whether that's something we ought to be doing here in North Carolina. And then the final thing I'll lift up is, and again, there are many, many places we could go,
Yes.
right? But the last thing I'll lift up will be around social studies. So the state board had actually passed, standard course of study that really tried to ensure that we had an accurate and full teaching of our history in our country. I think the General Assembly has tried to narrow that somewhat, and so we'll want to figure out ways to be sure that we do have that rich teaching of our history for all students here in North Carolina, so that we can understand why maybe some things exist as they do even today. What's in our history that has caused some of those results to be here today. To appreciate the massive struggles that some have had in our country and how they've overcome them. And so that would be something that I would certainly want to lift up as we go forward. But again, there are many, many areas one could go with that question.
Okay, we figured that. Okay, so here's Paulette's question. Paulette says, how and where is the money coming from to pay for vouchers? I'd like to add my part to it. And what would you do about that?
Yeah. So what the General Assembly has suggested is that, well, first of all, there is what's called sort of the general appropriations from that the General Assembly uses, and so they're using primarily property, income taxes, some sales tax to develop what will be the ultimate amount in a budget that can be then appropriated. And so what the General Assembly will say is that, or at least the majority in the General Assembly will say is that the first thing, or one of the things that they've done is they've ensured that they've put enough money in public schools. And so this is money that is not, coming from public schools. Rather, this is money that they've pulled from other sources. So they've decided maybe not to put as much money into things like transportation, roads, things of that nature. And so this is available money, right? I think that's probably, so I think that's highly questionable, is the way I would say it, because as I've already shared earlier, we are woefully underfunding our public schools. And so I would argue that these dollars are actually coming from dollars that should be in our public schools. What will I do related to this issue? So I'm opposed to this taxpayer-funded private school voucher program and believe we must, put an end to it as promptly as we can. That's going to require not only my advocacy, but then we've also got to elect others in the General Assembly. I like to say that are going to be champions of public education, so that these dollars can get back into our public schools. When you think about the fact that, now the General Assembly, even in the last couple of months, came back into session and passed, legislation that would have allowed another $463 million to go into the private school voucher program to allow essentially the wealthy of the wealthy to receive those vouchers, including those who already have their children in a private school and can afford it. Thankfully, the governor vetoed that, but we'll see. They have the ability to override that veto. So we'll see where that goes. But that's an example of where we need to have strong advocacy as well as different decision makers so that these dollars could go into our public schools. And so I'll be advocating as strenuously as I can to see that we put an end to this.
Thank you. So what do you plan for your office to offer as far as professional development goes? You know, the urban areas are probably okay, but it's the rural areas that need support, financial support, professional development, and support from the state. So do you have any thoughts on that, professional development?
Yeah, so I certainly do. You know, one of the things that I always do though is that, you know, anytime you're coming into an organization, you got to fully appreciate what is already in place before you start saying, well, we're going to do X, Y, and Z differently or what have you. And so this is going to be one of those areas where I don't have a complex understanding of all that is currently done with regards to professional development related to anywhere in the state, particularly in rural districts. Having said that, I do know that yeah, as I do my analysis, a couple of things that I'll certainly be thinking about are, you know, whether there are ways for us to utilize what we're doing now, Zoom opportunities to get more access to more folks in rural communities with regards to professional development. I think we've also, you know, so I do know enough to be dangerous in the sense that I do know that DPI currently has regional support.
Yes.
And so some of those then we'll have to see how strong they are and, you know, whether those can then be, you know, utilized to provide more professional development.
Sorry.
This also, just so folks understand, this also is another place where, yeah, we're talking about such limited resources that we can't do the level of professional development that we really need to be doing without, first of all, getting more dollars into our public school system.
Thank you. And that ties in with the next couple of questions here that are in chat. Gwen wants to know, wants you to share what percentage of the education lottery money actually goes to public education?
So the education lottery, all of the funds that are in the educational lottery technically go to public education. I think the probably the question that must be asked is the next question, which is, are these dollars supplementary or are they supplanting what's already going to public education? And so when the legislation was passed with regards to the education lottery, there was not put in that these dollars would be supplementary. So these dollars can, in fact, so one could look at the education lottery dollars and say, yes, they're going to public education. But the reality is that they are actually, I think, supplanting dollars that would otherwise also be going into public education. So you can have this sort of, you know, anyone could sort of say, well, those dollars are supporting public education from education. But that is, I think, not the complete answer, if that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. And Gretchen said, let's talk about funding equity. You have a position on funding. What is your position on funding equity?
Yeah. So certainly, just so everyone, you know, we're operating with the similar terminology. When I think about equity, that does not mean equal or the same for everybody, but rather that, yeah, you provide different levels of resources in this context, depending on what the needs are, so that everyone can get the opportunity to receive, in this instance, a sound basic education. So I am very much in favor of educational equity. I do believe that that is something that is desperately needed in our school system, and that's across the entire state, including and particularly in our low wealth communities. Yeah, and one thing I tell folks is this is also true in urban settings. So when I was
Yep.
superintendent of Guilford County Schools, one of the things that we did is we, leaned into this concept of equitable distribution of resources. For example, one of the things that we did is we recognized that there were some schools that needed additional resources for the students in those schools. And so we created what we called an enrichment region. So we had divided our region. So we had 70,000 students, about 125 schools. So we had divided our district into 4 regions that were sort of equal in size. But then we pulled out 9 schools to start with and said these 9 schools are going to actually receive the same amount as what other regions would receive that would have 25 or so
So
schools,
call you back.
25 plus schools. And so that resulted in equitable resources being
I sent
provided
it to
for a
you.
smaller number of schools. So I would definitely be looking to do that. Yeah, in fact, just so folks also appreciate my history, I have been with the Leandro litigation a long time, including serving as the attorney when Charlotte Mecklenburg and other urban districts joined that lawsuit. Also prepared before Howard Manning, and then in my most recent capacity as executive director for the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. The Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation funds the low wealth plaintiff districts in that litigation. And so very much aware of the need for us to differentiate the level of resources so that all of our children can receive a sound basic education. I think you're on mute. Colleen, I think you're on mute.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying to get Josh for the next one for him a Zoom link. Angela, you have a question. You were the last one, so you want to ask your question because I didn't see it in the chat.
Yes, hello, Mr. Green. My name is Dr. Angela Clayton. I'm the Vice President of the Granville Retired Teachers. I just have a couple of questions that are burning within me I wanted to ask, and I'm so glad to have the opportunity to speak with you. One is we were talking about resources for schools. My understanding is, and that's my is twofold maybe. My understanding is with charter schools who are public schools and public schools, they're having to share the funding. And a lot of times teachers prefer to work at a charter school rather than the traditional public schools because the restrictions, the where you say the accountability is lower. You can do more, you have more wiggle room to make more decisions that are school-based, and you don't have a lot of oversight. So it makes me think about Title I schools. We have several schools in certain counties where all the schools would qualify for Title I, but the administrators fail to apply because they don't want that oversight. They don't want people in their way telling them how to be what to do as an instructional leader. And so that's my question, how you view that, what we can do um, to circumvent that. Why is that understanding out there from administrators that, to get money to assist your students, you have to give up your authority and your leadership or your oversight ability within your school. Second thing I wanted you to address was staff development, professional development. I know that there are monies for professional development, but I have experienced as being a retired teacher where the administrator refused to allow the teachers to get staff development. She was that sole person. Staff development came within the school walls from her instructional staff and the leadership. So we weren't given opportunities to go out and do a workshop. Like I was banned from doing a workshop. I had to pay for my own travel, everything. And that's just sad. So it's not that the money is not out there. Sometimes leadership doesn't give their faculty the opportunity for those for one reason or another, whether it be for reprisal, that sort of thing. Also, and the last one is student discipline. I'm a parent, and I also was a teacher, and it was really difficult. My daughter was bullied in school, and it was really difficult to communicate to the leadership that, yes, she was in a fight, but only because she was hit and bullied to the point where she felt she had to protect herself. And so they equally got punished for the offense. And so as a parent, I had a problem with that because I know that children can take so much. And it's not just children that bullies them, they get bullied from adults too. And that's unfortunate that children have to, as parents, we give up all authority when we send our children to school. And we assume that the adults there are going to treat them with dignity and respect and going to make sure that they're safe. And so we as leaders sometimes often forget that we were once children and that if someone hits you, you're going to hit them back. That's your instinct. It's not, oh, I'm going to get in a fight tomorrow. I don't think children plan to get in a fight when they go to school. I think it just happens. And, I would get off work. I'm trying to teach and I would get off work and run in, why are you fighting? I've told you. Well, mama, she been, and I know it's the same child or the same instance. So I'm thinking hopefully that our schools can change the paradigm of discipline and let our children somehow find a platform to talk about discipline. Because a lot of times kids don't understand a quick decision can change their entire life. And adults are not forgiving. We don't forgive. We keep them, we hold them accountable for things that they've done in the past that we don't want to be held. I mean, we make a mistake. We want to go to church and ask for forgiveness and Lord to take care of it. And we're still the same devils we were when we went to church on Sunday. But I'm just saying, we have to have an atmosphere for children where they know that, I'm going to be supported even when I make a bad decision, which I
So,
am because
so
I'm in that. I'm
Angela,
sorry, but
I need to cut
okay,
you
well,
off and see if he can
I
respond because our
apologize.
time is up with him, but we'll
Okay,
let him answer real quickly. Thank you,
thank
Angela.
you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for your questions, and certainly also then thank you for the context you put around your questions. Certainly, with a lot of the what I hear is both some global issues as well as specific to situational issues. And obviously, I'm not going to be able to fully address individual situational issues. And so I just give you a little bit of context of how I think about some things, and then hopefully that'll give you some sense how we move forward. With regards to Title I believe Title I dollars are exceedingly beneficial to our schools and are to be utilized in ways that can benefit students. And so from a leadership vantage point, I think it's often the case that we have to help our school leaders understand that these dollars can be beneficial, and you're really not giving up a whole lot. I mean, this concept of folks thinking that they're giving up authority, I think it's a misnomer. Once you actually get in it and understand what Title I is truly about. With regards to staff development, again, you lifted up a specific issue in your situation. Again, philosophy around staff development is this is a critically important way for in any profession for folks to grow and learn. And so we've got to be able to provide those opportunities And oftentimes we have to help folks think about how best to utilize limited resources in ways that can allow folks to grow and learn. And so that would be my philosophy. And then with regards to student discipline, I also believe that it's important for folks to, start with, how do we start with providing instruction around positive behavior first, not always look at what's the penalty if you do something wrong, because oftentimes that actually doesn't teach the child anything. It just basically, takes them out of getting their educational opportunity. And so that's part of what we try to do around character development is how do you teach positive behavior? And students should be part of that as well, because oftentimes when they are engaged in what positive behavior looks like, then they can they'll rise to the occasion. So, and then the last thing I'll just say is this: one of the things that I often look at is what is let's be sure that our penalties are enforced in a manner that is fair, because oftentimes what happens is there are certain kids, particularly students of color, who are suspended out of school multiples of times as much as white students, for example. And
Yes.
so we've got to be sure that those things are done in a fair manner. So those would be my quick answers to your wonderful questions.
We thank you so much for coming. If everybody wants to come up off mute and give applause or thumbs up or say yay or good luck, come off
Thank you
applause
so
and
much.
say
Thank
thank
you
you.
so
Thank you
much.
and good luck.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we're
Thank you.
voting
Y'all be
for
blessed.
you.
Okay. Thanks for joining us.
We're
Yes, that's
voting for
important
you.
right
That's
there,
right.
Teresa. Okay, bye. Thanks. Okay, so next we will have candidate Natasha Marcus and Carol. Is she on yet?
I'm here.
Oh, yay. Hey, thank you. I'm sorry for the last minute sending the thing. You know how emails get caught. So thank you to you and Josh for getting you back on with us today.
Yeah.
So you've got members of the North Carolina Retired School personnel on here. Our president, Linda Gunter, whom you know, is down at the treasurer's meeting today. There's a association meeting the week prior to the treasurer's quarterly meeting. So she's on that. I don't think she's going to be able to come on Zoom, but
Oh, okay.
she'll know about this later, what we discussed. But thank you for your time. We are proud that you are that you are running and that you will be taking over this position. So want to give you a
That's the
chance.
plan anyway. We won't know till November 6th, but yes.
Hopefully we'll know that on that date. So would you like to start by sharing anything in general about yourself before we ask a few questions?
Sure. So I'm Natasha Marcus. For those of you I've not had a chance to meet in person yet, I've been doing my best to get, like Mo, all over the state and meet with as many folks in person as possible. But the state is a big state. And so I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you by Zoom. I am a current state senator serving my district from Mecklenburg County. I'm in my third term, so that's my 6th year in the North Carolina Senate. I am previously a litigation attorney. I got my law degree at Duke. That's what brought me to North Carolina back in 1991. And after growing up in a small college town in Western New York, my whole life, when I spent my first winter in North Carolina and saw these beautiful blue skies, I thought, I'm sold, and I never left. So I've been here ever since, and worked as an attorney in Greensboro for several years. After my second daughter was born, I could no longer manage the schedule of litigation law and 2 small children. So I was a stay-home mom for a long time. And that's when I first started, my oldest started school, and I became intimately familiar with our public school system in North Carolina and how different it is from New York, where my mom had been a teacher for 35 years, a 4th grade teacher at public school up where I grew up. So I was always raised to respect what teachers do. My grandmother was a teacher. Both of my aunts are teachers. My mom, a teacher of 35 years. And when my mom would join me to visit our daughter at school, she would say, well, when is your teacher's planning time? And when do they have their lunch? And where is the assistant in this room? These are small children. All these questions that she just could not believe the way it was so different for North Carolina teachers. And so I began volunteering in the classroom and doing what I could as a parent to help, and realized how important that was to the teacher's time to be able to break up kids into small reading groups. You depended on parents to come in and be reliable helpers. So it really opened my eyes to how we are, frankly, just not invested as we should be in our public education. My daughter is now a teacher. I have two daughters, adult daughters. My youngest is a teacher. She is in her third year of teaching second grade. I could not persuade her to stay in North Carolina and be a teacher, and that makes me deeply sad. Because she was right when she told me, Mom, why would I want to teach in North Carolina when I could make a whole lot more money and feel like I'm on a better career path if I go somewhere else? And I couldn't talk her out of it. And it really makes me sad, both for me, but for what our state, also for what our state's doing for public education. So I serve on the Education Committee in the North Carolina Senate, but I also serve on other committees, the Elections and Redistricting Committee, which I sometimes refer to as the Gerrymandering Committee, because that's what they do in there. I serve on the Judiciary Committee because of my law degree. I'm very interested in, among the things I've already talked about, public education, fair districts, fought very hard to try to stop the gerrymandering. Reproductive rights, very important to me as the mother of two daughters, that we not go backwards on issues about basic equality. And environmental protections. I think that the climate crisis is real and that we ought to be doing better to prepare for it and try to avoid the worst outcome. This is where I'm afraid we're headed. So those are some of the things that I'm passionate about, because I tend to be a pretty outspoken advocate for the things I believe in the Senate. They took this opportunity when they drew the last group of maps to gerrymander me right out of my district, put me in an area that is unwinnable by someone from my party. And so this is my last time in, my last couple months in the Senate. And now I'm running statewide, which is this race that they cannot gerrymander. And it is one of the 10 seats on the Council of State. Y'all are teachers, so you understand our basic government better than a lot of non-educators do. But I'll just say it's one of the 10 in the executive branch, statewide authority to handle matters related to insurance. So it may sound dry at first, but I like to get people's attention and realize, hey, if you pay an insurance bill in North Carolina, you really should care who your commissioner of insurance is, because it is among a lot of other duties, and I know you want to get to the other duties, but one of the most important duties of the job is it is the single person. It is not a commission of several people. It is a single commissioner of insurance who we elect once every 4 years, and this person has sole authority to set the maximum rate that insurance companies can charge all of us for auto insurance, homeowners insurance, workers' comp, and more. So that's a lot of authority in one person. And this person is not answerable to the governor, does not work for some higher boss that's going to make sure the job is done correctly. It is up to the voters to decide once every 4 years how the job is being done and if they want more of that person or a change. And I've been making the case that we need a change. We desperately need a change in this role. So that's why I'm running for Commissioner of Insurance. I'll pause there so that we can get on to whatever specific questions you want to
So
cover.
based on what you just said, we want somebody in there with integrity. So
Thank
that
you.
leads right into my question about what's the difference between you and your opponent?
There are a lot of differences between my opponent. His name is Mike Causey. He is, as I said, the incumbent. He's been there 8 years. And one of my big criticisms of him is that he tends to forget that this is a job that he was elected to do by the people of our state. that means he's supposed to be representing us and our best interest. That's what I do as a senator. That's what I did when I was the lawyer for my clients back when I practiced law. I get that I understand the job. And I'm afraid he is way too entangled with the insurance company to do this job well. He accepts a lot of campaign contributions from insurance industry sources, so they help get him elected. And then in return, we get no transparency and I think a lack of advocacy even on behalf of North Carolina consumers. So, for example, he has authorized 16 rate increases in a row during his 8 years of office, and there's one more currently pending before him now. I'll talk about that in a second. But of the 16 in a row that the Rate Bureau, which is again a private group that represents insurance companies. The Rate Bureau's job is to make insurance companies the maximum profit that they can. And the commissioner of insurance is supposed to be on the other side, a bit adversarial with the Rate Bureau, because the commissioner of insurance is supposed to represent the people who want as affordable a price as possible for insurance. And so the process is supposed to be Rate Bureau requests a rate hike, insurance commissioner doesn't allow it unless they justify it with data. And it's supposed to be a public hearing. He's empowered to force insurance companies through the Rate Bureau to come in public, justify with data under oath, subject to cross-examination by staff at the Department of Insurance, why they need to raise their prices. Because they are entitled to make a reasonable profit under North Carolina law. And let's be clear, we want them to make a reasonable profit because otherwise they're not going to offer policies here. But they're not entitled to make whatever they want. It's a regulated market because these are the types of insurance policies we're all pretty much required to have, right? You're not allowed to drive a car without insurance. In most cases, unless you own your house without a loan, you are required to have homeowners insurance. And I would argue you should have homeowners insurance even if you're not required to have it. So because of this regulation and the system we've set up, there's supposed to be these public hearings. So there's not supposed to be rate hikes made in private deals that we don't have any justification for. But that's what keeps happening with Mike Causey. 16 times in a row, he said there'll be a public hearing, but then he cancels it at the last minute and he meets privately with the insurance companies through the Rate Bureau. Again, the very companies that are helping fund his campaigns. And he comes out of those meetings. We don't know. There's not a public record of what's discussed. We don't know if there's any data that justifies a rate hike, but he announces to all of us that he's negotiated. And yet again, your rates are going up without any real explanation about why. And we're supposed to just trust that he made us a good deal. He likes to crow about that he's brought them down from the top number they requested. They requested some number and it's less than that. So you're welcome. And I just feel like, well, of course it's less than what their first ask is. Nobody ever gives them their full amount that they've requested. But the point is there's no transparency here. And I don't trust him that he's working on our behalf. He's also shown time and time again that consumer protection and consumer services are not his priority. He's closed regional offices that were popular and in major areas, population centers of our state, et cetera, and really whittled down the consumer protection division at the DOI. So those are just some of the differences. I guess I should spell it out here. I am not taking any money from insurance company PACs or their top executives for my campaign. I don't want to work for them. I don't want them to feel like that I owe them something. I don't want a conflict of interest. I learned that from my law career. You can't take money from one side and claim to represent the other. That shouldn't be allowed. I'll be clear. It is technically legal as long as he discloses it on his campaign reports, but I don't think it's right. And so I'm not doing it. I said that from day one. I'm also the only one of us that has a law degree. I'm very comfortable with the setting of a court-like setting, these public hearings in which the commissioner of insurance is supposed to sit and preside over these hearings and make sure we get a full throttle justification for a rate hike. And the fact that I have that experience, I think is really important. I'm also the only candidate who has legislative experience. Having served in the legislature, I understand how laws get made. I know a lot of the players in this space and in the government agencies. And so I think that experience is really important. Previous Commissioner of Insurance, Wayne Goodwin, had that experience and found it to be very valuable as well. I forgot, I said I would talk about the current rate request that's pending. So it's a 42.2% statewide average rate increase. So it's different in different parts of our state. So those of you living on the coast, you may have heard about it. It's as much as a 99.4% rate hike request for coastal properties. It's less in the mountains and somewhere in the middle of the state. And that is currently pending in front of my CAUSE. And he has finally called his very first public hearing. It actually started last week, just a month before Election Day, which I believe is fair to say, would never have happened if we weren't in election season and I hadn't been bringing this up every time I can about how he's never held one. So he called a public hearing, but I was very surprised that he is not presiding over that hearing. He's having a staff member do it for him, and he's not even in the room. So again, I don't think he's doing the job that we elect him to do. And I think that's a shame, because this is, again, one of the more important aspects, if not the most important aspect of the job. So again, that's one of the differences between us. I would hold the public hearings and feel very comfortable in that setting, doing that work.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions about your general role. But I also have one more question that folks wanted me to ask, and sort of based on what you just said. Is he being investigated for misuse of funds?
As far as I know, there's not an active investigation. Some of what he's done, like the financial contributions, are not illegal. So let me be clear, I'm not claiming that it's illegal, just that it shouldn't happen, I think. Some of the other things you may have read about in the newspaper about how he used state funds to pay his personal friend to be his private chauffeur, maybe within his his decision-making power as the head of a government agency, how to spend some of those funds within the agency. I would argue that's a ridiculous misuse of public funds. It should be going to things that are important in the job. So I'm not sure how much of what he's done. There was another political connection of his who had a six-figure salary for what turned out, by his own admission, to be a make-work job. He wasn't expected to actually do any work for that salary. Is that illegal? I don't know. I feel like it's unethical. I have heard that there are some formal complaints against him. I don't want to repeat them because I don't have the paperwork in my hand, and I don't want to say anything that is not fully supported by law, but I've heard about other possible types of investigation that may be happening, but I can't point to one that is currently underway. And sometimes, they are private until,
Right.
Until papers are actually filed in court.
Okay. Thank you for answering that. So we are concerned about Medicare as retirees, and one of your jobs as Commissioner of Insurance would be to provide counseling for those who are eligible. What are your plans on doing that, providing this counseling?
So that is a great example of one of the consumer protection services that I don't think the incumbent spends enough time working on. He's big on cracking down on fraud, and we could talk about that later. That seems to be his favorite part of the job. He also loves to visit fire departments and get his picture taken in front of the shiny red trucks, holding a giant grant check, which is not even money that's coming from his department. But those are the things he really likes to do. And cracking down on fraud is important. We could talk about that, but there's a lot that goes undone. And I have heard from former and current employees, good people at the Department of Insurance, who want to do this kind of work, the protecting seniors. I have met with insurance agents, and I know just from talking to people across the state during this campaign that once you turn 65, the phone calls from unscrupulous salespeople do not quit. One person called it, you may as well call it harassment. It's so bad. That's illegal for them to call you and try to sell you something. They are not allowed to reach out to you. They can advertise and try and get you to reach out to them. And you see it now because we're in open enrollment now, right? You see all the ads, but they are not even supposed to call you, let alone try and sell you something that is not right for you. I don't know how many seniors in North Carolina even know that basic fact, that they are protected by that law. These are the kinds of things that the SHIP program through the Department of Insurance should be educating seniors on. Even before you turn 65, because if you wait till you turn 65 to get some of this education, you're going to be deluged by these phone calls that don't quit and maybe fall prey to that. And so we need better outreach. I know there's people at DOI now who want to do this kind of work, and I can't wait to work with them, partner with them to be more aggressive about getting out around to groups like yours. Would be perfect. I mean, I don't know what he's doing now and what he's not. It's a pretty opaque agency. If you're not there, it's hard to, other than people giving me a call, some of them want to remain anonymous, from people who are inside DOI telling me, but I do know that it's a lot less than it used to be under previous commissioner of insurance. And I look forward to beefing that back up again and doing that kind of work, because that's the kind of stuff that makes me excited to be commissioner of insurance, working on behalf of the people of North Carolina who should not be taken advantage of. On CCRCs, continuing care retirement communities, that oversight of those is important for seniors, because if you're going to invest a huge amount of money to buy yourself a spot at a CCRC with the plan that you're going to stay there probably until you die and expect that that place will be solvent and provide quality care to you when you need it, that is a huge investment. And it is the commissioner of insurance's job to regulate those CCRCs and make sure they're not taking advantage of seniors. And under his watch, the situation, I don't know how many of you are from the Charlotte area, I've heard, but there was a big controversy going on at Aldersgate CCRC, which still is not fully resolved. And in my opinion, that got way too close to the brink of shutting down before the incumbent got involved the way he should have, and stopped that from happening sooner. So those are some of the ways in which I look forward to working on behalf of state retirees like you. I'm sure you've talked to Wesley Harris about the state treasurer's role in that as well. But I would be a partner with Wesley Harris in that role of protecting seniors and your healthcare and your investments, etc.
You would work together on the Council of State, so that would be good. Yes. So you mentioned fraud, and that's another area that concerns us as retirees. Would you do the same approach, or what are your thoughts about dealing with fraud and letting people know?
So let me be clear. I've told you how my opponent loves to talk about that aspect of the job. It seems to be his favorite thing. And I think a lot of it is because you get a pretty good headline in several local papers about how someone got arrested for misrepresenting something, to get their insurance coverage that they maybe should have got. And it's wrong. No one should do that. And I don't want anyone to try and say that pretending that it's not real or that it's not wrong. It's wrong. But I can't help but feel like when I read those stories, if you dig down under the headline, I mean, one of the most recent ones was somebody had misrepresented something about her pet on a pet insurance policy to try to get coverage for a surgery or some sort of thing her pet needed, and was brought up on fraud charges for, I think it was like $400 or something. So again, that's wrong. But is that where the majority of the commissioner of insurance's efforts and his hirees should be really focused on people who might be on their pet insurance? I mean, I just feel like that's the wrong focus, because we know, for example, there are these unscrupulous companies calling from out of state, out of the country, calling our seniors and getting folks to switch to a Medicare plan that is not right for them. Where's the emphasis on cracking down on that? That's the kind of bigger, widespread, more impactful fraud that I think he should be focused on, not to mention he loves to crack down on fraud by individuals. And again, it's wrong. But where's the crackdown on? Sometimes the fraud's coming from the insurance company side.
Yeah.
They are not paying claims that they're supposed to pay. Insurance companies, we know how they love to confuse you about what your policy covers, delay in trying to wear you down. My parents went through it when they had a water leak. They had coverage, but man, we had to fight on their behalf as their kids to say, why are you not paying our parents' claim? This is validly covered claim. Why are you denying and delaying and putting up, walls to? That's the kind of stuff I wish our commissioner of insurance would also focus on with as much enthusiasm, because again, the job is to protect consumers. And yes, cracking down on fraud does bring down the cost for everybody, because fraud accounts for, on average, about 10 cents of every dollar in policies that we pay. That's the national average anyway. I don't know if you've met with my opponent on this, but he loves to say 30 cents of every dollar is due to a fraudulent claim. He's never shown any data for why he thinks it's 30 cents instead of the national average, which is the only data I've seen, which is 10. If it's 30 cents on every dollar in North Carolina, he's either wrong or there's something really bad about fraud in North Carolina. And I would ask the current commissioner of insurance, why is it so especially bad under his leadership? So I don't know what's going on with that number. But I look forward to looking into the not just the small potatoes cases, but the widespread fraud that's really costing us money and doing harm to consumers in North Carolina.
Okay. You shared that rates have gone up 16 times the amount over while he's been in office. So what would you do? That's our concern, to help reduce costs in North Carolina.
So yeah, and if you want to look at specifically in your area how much rates have gone up, we put together data that the current commissioner of insurance does not make available. So it's very hard for someone to even understand how much rates have increased since he's been in office for 8 years. So we put it all together on a website. It's a little bit of a snarky title, but my opponent's nickname is Rate Hike Mike because of how many times he's raised rates. So we use that. I didn't give him that nickname. He's had that for a while, but we use that nickname. So ratehikemike.com is a website where we put all the data that we were able to compile. It took a lot of work. We had some college PhD students help us put this together to crunch all the numbers. And you can put in your county, and it'll show you how much rates have gone up in your county on average, how much faster that is than the rate of inflation, because this is not just inflation at play here. Again, my opponent would like to point to inflation and blame that for everything, but rates were rising way before COVID, way before inflation was even a factor in our economy. And they've been going up faster than the rate of inflation. So it's not that. I think it's that we have a bad commissioner of insurance, but it'll also show you what the pending rate hike is in your county and other information about how his rate hikes compare to previous commissioners, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of data there. If you want to dig in, if we got any wonky people that want the numbers, please go to ratehikemike.com. But how we avoid that is we have public hearings. So I am not going to promise you here. I would love to make you an empty campaign promise to try to win your vote, which some people do, that if you vote for me and I win, I'll never raise your rates ever again. I'm not going to say that, because sometimes rates do have to go up. We have to make sure we have a vibrant marketplace of insurance options. That's the goal, that's affordable, reliable insurance for North Carolinians. That's my goal. The prices should not be so low that insurance companies want to pull out of our market, like has happened in Florida, where you can't get an insurance company to write a policy there anymore. And we could talk at length about all the mismanagement that's happening in Florida. I think a lot of it is their failure to deal with climate change well, and their very long coastline, and they're even more susceptible to storms than North Carolina is, for example. But so setting that aside, we don't want it too low, but we also shouldn't let them charge such a high rate that North Carolinians are getting squeezed. And what has been happening, if you dig into the data that was published by AM Best, it's a trusted nationwide source for insurance data. New York Times dug into it and analyzed state by state. It showed, New York Times reporting showed, that in North Carolina, insurance companies on homeowners policies, which is the policy on which they most often claim they can't make money, they made profit, pretty hefty profit, 9 out of the last 10 years, which is the time period they studied in every state. 9 out of the last 10 years, hefty profit here on homeowners policies. They've lost money in other states, like Iowa, interestingly, interior states, not where you might guess, and they're making it up by charging us more and making huge profits here, which is exactly what our elected North Carolina Commissioner of Insurance is supposed to protect us from. And why have we not had that protection? I think it goes back to this lack of public hearings.
Yeah.
Because without the data, all we can say is, well, he negotiated lower than what they asked for, and I guess we'll just have to trust him. That's not how it's supposed to work. We have not had a public hearing on homeowners policy prices in 10 years in North Carolina. It's been 10 years since they've had to justify a rate hike. And that's wrong. That's just wrong.
Yeah.
So that's how we avoid unfair rate hikes, is we follow what the law anticipates, which is to have public hearings and make them justify it.
Yes. All right. Well, we appreciate you serving in the Senate, the time that you've spent there. We appreciate you being willing to run because it is important. We're proud that NCAE and NCRSP are endorsing you, and hopefully the folks will come off Zoom, not Zoom, so come off mute, and everybody say congratulations or good luck, or we're thinking of
Thank
you.
you all. And I just want to say thank you for the work you did in our public schools. I'm one of many people that when I pause to think about the teachers in my life, both my family member teachers, but the teachers who taught me, I get teary-eyed because I know how much they influence my life. I see it. My mother still to this day has students that find her through Facebook. Sometimes it's through me. Are you Mrs. Rath's daughter? Would you tell her how much she meant to me? So I know that the work you did is a big part of so many people's lives. And I admire it. I did not have the patience to do the work that you do. I do this instead because it's something I can do. I appreciate your support in the work that I do, which I think is important, maybe not as important as what you all did, but I'm grateful for this time together. My website is, I see some stuff popping up in the chat. Hopefully someone will put this in there for me. I can't talk and type, but my website is natashamarcus.com, just my name. Lots more information there. I hope you'll sign up to get emails from us if you're a supporter and want to hear more. And the site that I mentioned where you can get the data on insurance rate hikes and is ratehikemike.com. So thank you. Thank you all for the time.
Thank you very much.
Go vote if you haven't yet. Early voting is happening now.
Great, thanks.
And have a great day.
Bye. Good luck.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Folks, we're glad you could join us today. I know Linda came on. She's probably she's on mute. She might still be sitting in her other meeting listening. But anyway, it's important to get information about both these candidates out if you can, folks. So share it with your friends and let them know what's going on too with those two candidates.
Colleen.
Yes.